Hey, so I want to talk about this idea of spiritual awakening versus embodiment. So the awakening is a moment, or perhaps longer, of seeing the beauty and the divinity in all things, seeing that life is like an illusion or a dream, that you've had other lifetimes, that this is just one person and not the totality of who you are, that you have a soul that is multidimensional, that this life is kind of like a video game, that the true nature of everything is love and acceptance. You don't have to earn love or prove anything, and you are good enough as you are. So any kind of experience of that nature could be seen as an awakening. And I used to think that that was kind of it. Like, you would reach that point and then life from then on would just be like awesome and perfect. And there are some people like Eckhart Tolle where it seems that they have the awakening and then that state is permanent for them. And I think that's kind of what happened with the Buddha. I don't know very much about Buddhism, but I think he became enlightened and then he just like held on to it. But that doesn't happen for everyone. Certainly not happen for me, because I've had these awakened experiences and then they go away and the ego creeps back in with doubt, fear, identity, and control. And I used to think that I hadn't actually had an awakening because I had this perspective that the awakening would be permanent. But what I'm learning now is that embodiment means basically maintaining that perspective of awakening in as much of your life as you can, like ideally 100%. But people can be awakened many times. It can take years, decades, an entire lifetime to like fully embody that awakened perspective 100% of the time. So it's actually really normal to keep losing the awakened perspective and have to keep choosing it again. And sometimes we need the inner child work for these really deep wounds. So what can happen is one part of us has the awakened perspective, but then the inner child is very rooted in fear and trauma. So you're living your life from the awakened perspective, and then something happens that triggers your trauma, and then all of a sudden you're reacting out of fear or having a panic attack or reacting in anger or just like retreating into yourself or whatever it is. You're having what could be called like an unawakened response. You've lost that perspective that everything is love and you are a soul and life is happening perfectly and you have everything that you need. You lose that perspective when your trauma is triggered, or you just forget. The ego just creeps back in, and that's really normal, and that actually happens to like the vast majority of people. I think a spontaneous permanent embodiment is actually pretty rare. So what embodiment would look like is that you're having the whole truth within yourself. So all aspects of yourself are aware of the truth, and then you have compassion towards yourself and with the world. There's no inner conflict and there's no resistance to life, either internal or external, and you embrace emotions as they come up and you go with the flow of life, and you act from freedom and authenticity. So it doesn't mean doing nothing, which I think is kind of another myth of like, oh, the enlightened person just gonna sit there all day long and do nothing. But I think to embody it, it's gonna mean action depending on what your life mission was. Like if you're an artist, embodying your higher self is gonna mean creating art. If you're a writer, you're gonna write. If you're a teacher, you're gonna teach. Like, the embodiment is gonna include action for whatever purpose you chose, and it's gonna be divinely inspired action from a place of joy and truth and authenticity of who you really are. And so this process for me of moving from awakening to embodying has included dark night of the soul, which is where the ego realizes that it's not the only one in charge, and the spiritual ego, which is something that a lot of people get really caught up in, which is where the ego is still just trying to take over your awakening and not seeing that the awakening really has nothing to do with it. Like, it will take credit for it basically, or it will still just try to control your life trying to make you like a spiritual person as your identity, and judging people who are not spiritual. You know that's your ego whenever you're judging people or judging yourself as being not spiritual. And that's normal as your attachments and paradigms dissolve, because the ego is terrified that you're losing all these other identities. So now you're trying to attach on to something new. So you could even attach to being a light worker, or being from a certain like star system, or just being an awakened person. Like that can be your new attachment. And so the next kind of level of that is to realize that everyone else has the same nature that you have. Like we're all the same source. So there's no superiority of the awakened person. That's the ego that's thinking you're superior to unawakened people. And for me, I have flipped back and forth between an awakened perspective and a fear-based perspective probably thousands of times. Like it's a daily practice of trying to bring the loving, truthful perspective into daily living. Like for me, this has not been like an instantaneous thing. Although it's so much easier to occupy the awakened perspective in nature when you're just like chilling there in the sun by the water, you know, with the trees, looking at the flowers. Like it's great to have those practices to help cultivate that. But then I find like when I go to the grocery store, or when I'm like walking around downtown or whatever, like that's when it's easier to lose it, and you're caught up with like talking to other people, and especially people who are going to trigger you with their if you could call it like identity-based perceptions. They're gonna like make it hard for you to maintain your awakened state. And that's like really the challenge of embodiment in a world that most people are not embodying the higher perspective. So, another trap of the spiritual ego is to say that the negative emotions are like not allowed because you're a spiritual person now. But true embodiment means embodying all of it, including the fear. So you're welcoming all the emotions that come, all aspects of self, and that includes the physical body, because some people become spiritual and say like, oh, I'm this higher being and not this lower body, but the body's you. So if we're gonna embody truth, we're embodying everything, which means embodying your body, because it is an aspect of your soul in the third dimension. It's not actually separate from you. And calling it like a meat suit or something is to reject it, in my opinion. And I think that to see the true nature of things is to see that your body really is you. Where does your body end and you begin? Like, I don't think that there is a point. This is the expression of the soul in the third dimension. But that is just my opinion where I'm at with this. But I don't think rejecting the body as being unspiritual is like a very loving perspective. So that was something I was thinking about recently, the awakening embodiment thing. So awakening can result in permanent embodiment of truth, but I think it's more common that the ego creeps back in and the fear creeps back in, and that's totally normal. This is the process of trying to just embody it like as much as we can and heal those aspects of ourselves that are still in fear, and to live our lives interacting with other people and doing all the things that trigger our fear, and to keep bringing ourselves back to that awakened perspective and try to live from that place as much as we can. So, hope this was helpful. Thank you for watching.